Good morning. I just realized with shock and horror, this is my third OpenPOWER summit. Excellent. So my name is Georg. I'm the chair and head of product development at Vereign. And I am going to talk to you about making it real with OpenPOWER. And you will hopefully get what I mean by that at the end. Since most of you will never have heard of us, I'm pretty sure, that don't worry, that's perfectly fine, we're very young. We started this company in November 2017. We're a Swiss company based in Zug and have a very diverse founders team. We have a technical team that we based in Plovdiv, about 18 senior technologists working on the solution, and we've been IBM partner since March 2018, OpenPOWER Foundation member since about 2018 sometime. I couldn't remember exactly when we became member, but and we've been selected for the FinTech Award by F10 and 6, which is the Swiss Stock Exchange, for the Swiss Digital Economy Award, which is going to be held in late November in the Hallenstadion in Zurich. So we've been through a very interesting 2 years so far, and the mission that we are on is a mission of authenticity. Now, I do not know who of you followed the news, but about 2 months ago, we saw for the very first time a scammer successfully using a deep fake voice attack to transfer money. So they managed to use AI to impersonate I think German actually businessman who was speaking in English with heavy accent, and to a business partner in Eastern Europe, I think. And they were able to convince the business partner to transfer somewhere in the area of 140,000 euro. So, and that using a deep fake for the very first time. Now, many people say, well, video deep fakes are actually only just a couple of months away. We all know the things that are being done. The effort right now is still high, but it's going to go down. So we have a real challenge there because, quite frankly, authenticity is going to be a big, big problem. If we no longer know that we're actually talking to the person on the phone, if we no longer know that the video chat is really with this person, because it could just be an AI behind it, that's going to be a challenge for quite a few business situations. But we don't actually have to go that far into, deep tech, high tech to actually find problems there, because quite frankly, we haven't even managed yet to secure one of the oldest technologies we're using, which is email. I mean, 95% of the businesses rely on email for the primary means of communication. China excluded. I know China is mostly based on one messaging app that we all know, but everyone else uses email predominantly and primarily. Whenever it comes to crossing company domains, email is the number one. Most companies today have the best combination of email filtering on the server, trying to apply some logic, then a lot of employee training, do not click that link. And if they do click that link, because they inevitably will, we punish them. That's the best we can come up with today. That's the actual solution we have today. And it does not work. We see it does not work. Business email compromise is actually at an all-time high. It is growing really, really rapidly. It costs us billions by now. I mean, it has amazing growth rates. Every industry would be happy about those kind of growth rates. It's the number one cybercrime by now. The FBI is calling it the $9 billion scam. So we haven't solved this problem in any way, shape, or form. Now imagine, every email you received were to carry proof of the actual person that sent it. Verified proof of the person that has been sending that email. So its email does not become account to account, it's now person to person. Every mail proves to you who it is really from, whether they had the authority to send this in a business context, and if you send email, you also receive proof, verification that the right person has received and read this. All of this on a tamper-proof audit trail that actually is secured by distributed ledger. That is effectively what we've been building. That's our very first application of the technology we're building. But if you want to do that, right, if you want to make things authentic, if you want to add identity to email, because emails, I mean, all these things are possible in email because email lacks an identity layer, right? There is no identity protocol in email. Now, if you want to do that, you need an actual identity. But if you need an identity, you do need a true digital self. Today, our lives have become digital. Digital is no less real than the physical world. In fact, sometimes it's even more real. Everything is moving to the digital world. That means our identity is defined through digital to an increasing amount. What we have today, personally, I think, is very unsatisfactory. It's a situation where, in fact, we have a few very large companies that have proprietary silos of identity that somehow, maintain those identities for people, but no one really owns them anymore. The counter movement to that typically talks about self-sovereign identity, an identity that people actually own, that puts user data back under control of the user. That is exactly what we've been building. We've been building a self-sovereign identity that puts data back under the user's control. Now, when you're talking about identity, I mean, there's a lot of identity startups out there, right? I have a really bad sound here. I'm sorry. Is that okay? Because I get like weird echoes here. Okay, cool. Now, identity is an interesting problem because we all already have way too many identities out there, right? We have 191 business passwords on average. Most of those are actually 5 passwords, which are moderately secure, which we have been reusing. But nonetheless, those 191 passwords are securing 191 fragments of our identity. We never really know what's going on with them, which is a huge issue. So we don't really need nor want more identity or more fragmentation, which is why we've been building an identity that actually aggregates, third-party verification aggregates your various accounts and also, identity from a bank or from a government in your local hands on your local devices. Because such a self-sovereign identity, we believe, must ultimately be universal. So what we have been building is an identity that we can attach to email, yes, because email is the most important use case right now, given that we have almost 4 billion email users, and it is so important in all our communication, and business email compromise is such a huge problem. But it's an identity that I can attach to virtually any other application out there as well. So we already have e-signing, we have login with selective data disclosure, so your Google sign-in, your sign-in with Apple, all these kind of things. Only you can now do this with your own verified identity, an identity where you can prove I am really me because I have, for instance, verified this through a governmental identity or through a bank KYC or through any other source of actually authenticating that you are you. That's the solution we've built. And it creates a connection which we call the social fabric because it is peer-to-peer. So whenever I interact with someone through the email protocol now, and I use Vereign to do it for my identity layer, say I communicate with you and I choose my email profile, which contains the things that I am comfortable sharing with people with who I send email. So it may contain my name, my email address, my phone number, things like that. Whenever I do that, Hugh gets that information. Hugh now responds to me using his email profile, which contains the things that he feels comfortable communicating to other people and proving to other people as part of this communication. We create a live link between one another. So whenever our underlying data now changes, we actually get those updates in sort of a magical address book that actually allows us to stay in touch and get updates from one another and attach then that same identity to anything else we are doing, any identity interaction we're doing, any document we're signing, all of these things we can link back to the same root identity. Technically speaking, underneath this, you can think of this as a peer-to-peer decentralized PKI. It solves the problem of key generation and distribution because it connects the key directly with the root identity of the person under the person's control. And we're using distributed ledgers to make that data tamper-proof and make it impossible or very, very hard to not be able to change that retroactively, to not be able to pretend something existed at a time when it didn't. So that is what we think a true digital self needs to be. It needs to be something we control, something we own that lives on our devices, protected by the best cryptography we can come up with at this point in time. And we don't invent the cryptography. We follow whatever the cryptography community gives us. But actually, that is what we believe a true digital self should be. It should be something that lives with us. But if we want to control it, I mean, if we really want to trust this, it needs to follow certain principles. It needs to be trustworthy, right? And that means third-party verification of the technology stack and data. Now, and I mean the entire technology stack. Because, quite frankly, if there is any part of that stack that I cannot verify, that I cannot audit, that I cannot in any way rebuild if I have to, I think I have a problem. It needs to be user-controlled. The user needs to own it. Which means, again, if you don't own the actual technology underneath it, how much control do you really have? If you cannot own this, how much control do you have at the end? So our solution is built 100% from the start on OpenPOWER. OpenPOWER is our reference architecture, together with Red Hat. Actually, so I see the Fedora shirts in the back, so I feel very much at home here. But it must be a stack from the ground up that is open, that I could, if I had to, self-host and self-run. It needs to be distributed. No centralized system or single point of failure. I need to be able to run this in federated networks that actually work together as one for the user, because let's face it, most users will not want to self-host this, right? 99% of this planet will not want to self-host it. But the 1% that really do should be able to. And it needs to be usable. Because I believe cryptography has failed us in one very important way. It's become too hard to use for too many people. I mean, I've been in email signature and encryption since 1997. And in the beginning, I thought we could teach people how to manage keys and how to do all these things. And by now, I've given up. It will not work. No matter what we do, that path will lead us nowhere. We can't get that adoption. So it needs to be zero touch. The security part, the key management needs to be absolutely invisible for the user. We need to make it usable and user-friendly. And seamlessly integrated into applications. The only way that I know how to give us all these principles, how to bring all of that together, to build the actual identity that I would want, is through open ecosystems. Which is why, I mean, I've been a fan of OpenPOWER for about, 5 years now or so, roundabout. When I first realized what IBM had done by, kicking off the OpenPOWER Foundation, I got very, very excited because we thought back then that an open hardware architecture was unattainable. Everyone had arranged themselves with the reality of, well, it's all Intel. And we can't really do anything about that because no one will ever invent another hardware architecture. It's too costly. So for me, OpenPOWER was one of the most important moments actually in the entire history of open architectures, because, like software and hardware, because it finally gave us an architecture that's actually open to the core. Which is why everything I've been doing in my previous company and this one has always been built toward that, because I believe open ecosystems are what can give us the trust in technology. So for me, actually, self-sovereign identity, and I believe identity is one of the biggest challenges we face right now. Self-sovereign identity plus open power is the future for digital identity that we deserve. Because in my mind, I mean, this is the vision that we are working towards, we actually want to see a world of federated networks run on open power servers, on workstations, on clouds, where we have various hardware designs, hardware-based cryptography of different flavors, purpose-built appliances, and they'll be run by various operators and organizations. This will be run as an infrastructure, partially by governments, partially by companies, partially by associations, maybe even by some self-hosting people. And all of this will work together as an open ecosystem that gives us this kind of approach. Someone who looked at our white paper actually said, this kind of feels like, it's a little bit like the principles of Switzerland put into technology for identity. And that's about right. Because I actually think that these principles, starting from subsidiarity, so you create organizational structures that live at the lowest possible level, right? Wherever people can self-govern, they should. You don't need very large entities to govern them. I think that's actually the right principle. So I believe that is exactly the kind of future that I would want for myself, that I would want for my children, and that's the future we are actually working towards. And with that, I can only thank you. And let's build this future together, because I actually believe that open power is the basis on which we can build this. It's the only hardware architecture right now that I see that actually has the potential for us to build this. So, thank you.